And I think the crisis goes deeper than just an opioid crisis within the veteran community. I think the crisis is actually that we're not taking care of our veterans. Because how are you going to fill a military service with volunteers when people know that you're just going to get tossed out and thrown away at the end? Welcome to the Alternative Flight Plan. I'm Dr. Kristin Barnes, retired naval aviator and now a naturopathic doctor and acupuncturist. I've come out of the ready room into the treatment room to help you find answers to your complex health challenges. If you're fed up with the conventional medical system, this show is definitely for you. We're going to talk about all things alternative to conventional medicine. Today's guest is Matthew Whiz Buckley, who is the CEO of the nonprofit foundation No Fallen Heroes. He provides grants to veterans, first responders, and their families to receive psychedelic-assisted therapy for trauma and PTSD. If you feel like someone would benefit from this information, please share. Also, you can join us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook for more information. So without further ado, here we go. All right. Welcome to the Alternative Flight Plan. I am beyond stoked to have my current guest on with us. This is Matthew Whiz Buckley, a fellow naval aviator and a colleague in the psychedelic business, if you will. But we're going to get a lot into that. Whiz, welcome to the show.
Doc, thanks for having me, man. It's weird being on the other side of this, but I'm fired up. Congrats for everything you're doing. You are making my heart smile. You are putting the work in and putting the ladder down. So thanks for all you're doing. So honored and humbled to be here.
Well, I think it's fair to say that I wouldn't be here without the help that I've received from you and the organization No Fallen Heroes, and we'll put plenty of plugs in for how people can find that by the end of the podcast. But so let's just dive in. And if we get interrupted, I apologize. I brought my dog with me today, so I've got mutual support in the form of canine help. Hopefully that won't be. Yeah. All right. So tell us a little bit about. We'll get into the background, but let's just start with where you are now and what you're doing for veterans.
Geez, man, I'm actually I'm on the downside right now. I'm a little sick right now. I got home late Sunday night from a healing retreat at a place called Rising Ridge in Oklahoma. Former Navy senior chief, a corpsman who served with the FMF with the Marines. Ton of combat trauma, ton of combat experience, and he healed with the medicine. So he opened a retreat center out there outside of Tulsa. So got out there Friday morning, I think it was, and you can relate to this. 16 folks showing up, not knowing each other, essentially, just knowing they're all veterans. We had some disabled veterans, and it was just it's so cool. I feel like a parent on Christmas Eve, seeing the kids not knowing what's wrapped, right? So a lot of nervous energy, a lot of, just what am I doing here? And then by the time we took the class photo Sunday, these guys looked 5,000 pounds lighter, eyes brighter, crying, hugging each other, right? So 2.5 days before that, shake hands and, standoffish. And man, it was just, it's incredible. I can't. When I got back from my initial medicine work, I guess I should have known this word for the SATs, but I didn't. Ineffable. I just really can't put into words, being able to hold space it was in a beautiful dome and just experiencing and seeing the healing that's going on. It makes my heart smile. It ain't easy. You actually get to watch a hero's journey, right? During the medicine, the leave, the high, the low, the battle, and then oh my God, I'm alive and it's a brand new day. So just got back from that. And then the weekend before that, I was out in Oregon with, our brother Daniel Carcillo, two-time Stanley Cup champ with the Blackhawks, a lot of head trauma. He was the goon, but he healed with the medicine, and he opened a place out your way up in the Pacific Northwest called Experience Onward. And that was interesting because, as you know, I like to hold space, but in the legalized states, they got a process, right? They have an SOP. So if you're not sitting with the medicine, you're not allowed in the retreat center. So Daniel and I went hiking up wherever, near Mount Hood or something like that. It almost turned into the Revenant. I wasn't dressed for hiking, man. And we're knee high in snow and stuff like that. But it was cool being in nature and going on a hike while these folks were sitting with the medicine. It's just there was still, there was still that connection. Like my kids were in it, and I'm going to see them in a little bit. I had a little bit of separation anxiety, but very, very long answer to your short question. Just busy, just trying to put in the work. Our goal is to have a minimum of at least 3 to 5 veterans, first responders, or family members sitting with the medicine each month. And I'm so proud, as you and I had to sneak off to Costa Rica. We got to be healing our heroes at home. So it's really making my heart smile to go to Oregon, to go to Oklahoma. We did an all women's retreat out in Sedona last year. So Texas, Colorado, Oregon, Oklahoma, we're starting to hit that mission objective of finally healing our heroes at home. But I'm, as you know, man, I feel blessed and unstoppable. So things are good.
Yeah. So you said a bunch of stuff that I'm not sure everybody's going to understand. So I'd like to start unpacking this because I think what we're doing in the veteran community is still bubbling its way to the surface for the folks that aren't directly involved in it. So what is this medicine stuff you're talking about?
Exactly. And you know me, I mean, shit, you and I met in Key West, I think, 2000, some other
About
lifetime
98.
ago. Jesus.
Yeah.
So could you imagine you and I talking like this? We would have kicked our own ass. We would have laughed at each other and we would have thrown us out of the O Club or something like that. So the medicine is psychedelic-assisted therapy. So, let me give you a quick Whiz medicine, the executive summary. I was born and raised in South Jersey, South Philadelphia, Irish Catholic family, 6 kids, not lower middle classish. But my parents I would have never known that. But we made the Pope look Jewish. I was an altar boy, 3 masses on Sunday, coat and tie, Catholic schools. And, it just, I was that kid. And then, unfortunately experienced some sexual abuse as a child. And then, my sister, as a freshman in college, my beautiful sister, Monica, was hit by a drunk driver when she was at Villanova University. And that was it was a hand grenade. It destroyed, my parents. It destroyed my family. She was the middle. She was the glue. And I'll never forget, I was taught as a Catholic that God's a dude with a beard sitting on a throne, shooting lightning bolts out at people. If you do, who tells a kid if you miss mass on Sunday, you're going to burn in hell for eternity? I mean, it's a whole separate conversation. But anyway, what I'm getting at is, I lost my faith in God. I lost, what type of God kills my sister? I'm sexually abused. And then, like most of us, let's go join the military. Let's go take our childhood trauma and add to it. And then, I flew Hornets. I was a West Coast guy for most of my career up in Lemoore. Then I'm this old. I was in El Toro for a year before they closed it. And then finally down in Miramar, and then left active duty and went to fly Hornets for 5 years in the reserves in Fort Worth. And during 15 years, I lost 16 buddies. As you remember, CAG 11 in the mid 90s, we lost 8 before that was during workups. We lost 8 from Kara Holtgren all the way to K9. I mean, it was, I'm like, we didn't even start heading towards Iraq yet, and we lost 8 people. So 16 brothers and sisters along the way. And then I found out recently the number's up to 4. I've lost 4 F-18 brothers to suicide. So pretty bad trauma. I didn't know how bad, and very long answer, short question, but we'll get to the medicine. I was just circling the drain. Very brief airline career. The morning of September 11th was my first and essentially last day at work at American Airlines. So I went to Wall Street, and I was flying for the reserves out of Fort Worth, and then I went to Wall Street. So you're in this organization. You trust the men and women with your life, or they're not in that organization for long. You're gone. To Wall Street, where I couldn't let somebody watch my wallet for 5 minutes when I went to the head. People would throw their own mother in front of a bus for $1. So talk about a super loss of mission and purpose and brotherhood and sisterhood. started hitting the booze harder, as you know, naval aviation culture of tonight we drink, tomorrow we die.
Yeah, I might know a few things about that.
To Wall Street. And then sadly, some drugs. And I had some pretty serious dark nights of the soul, spiral in the drain. The only reason I'm on this podcast is because of my beautiful bride and my kids. They essentially pulled me out of those. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. So 4 years ago, 5 now. 2025. After my third suicide, a groomsman in my wedding, Eric Swenson, Swede, Marine Hornet guy, beautiful bride, 5 kids, just decided to check out, man. And I looked at Susie and I said, we got to do something about veteran suicide. Back then, Uncle Sam's number was, 17, 18? Now we think it might be 22. Now it might be whatever. I was like, my God, that's a horror. That's a mass shooting on a daily basis in the veteran community. Literally, if I don't even want to put this out to the universe, but could you imagine if 22 kids were getting shot, not once a year, once a day in schools? We would, even the gun freaks would freak out and say, we got to do something. But veterans, let's move along to the next issue. So we started, big marketing department, Top Gun Options, Top Gun Fighter Foundation, small marketing department, you're looking at them. So I started Top Gun Fighter Foundation to try and end veteran suicide. But how do you keep one of our sisters or brothers from killing themselves? Buy a suit, help them pay the rent, write a resume. Clueless. And around that time, a buddy of mine said, hey, there's a group of Navy SEALs that go to Mexico and special forces guys that do psychedelic-assisted therapy. And there's a really cool group going in a couple weeks. Would you want to go? And I said, man, go to Mexico and do drugs with Navy SEALs next weekend? Sign me up, man. Sounds like a great weekend. They briefed me clearly, but nothing can prepare you. You'll read the manual, you'll read 2 pages and you're like, all right, feeling pretty good. And then there's like our flight manual, warning, nothing can prepare you for what you're going to experience. I'm like, okay, now I'm scared again. Another 2 pages. All right, I feel good. Warning, I'm like, what is going on? But it made sense. So, we can, the podcast isn't this long for my initial debrief, but my dad died of a broken heart. He died because of Monica years later. When I played sports in high school and I'd miss the bus to go home, so he'd pick me up after work. And in between St. Augustine Prep and our home was the cemetery, and he stopped every day. And he got out of the car and cried every day. And I remember years later, like sitting on the couch with my dad when Matthew and Jack, my boys were, playing it. And he knew what I was talking about clearly because I looked at him and I said, Dad, how did you do it? And he said, Matthew, when they lowered her in the ground, I wanted to jump in with her, but I had you. So I'm convinced he died of all my brother and other sisters are like, he died of a broken heart. So on the medicine, there was Monica. She was angelic. She was beautiful. And she was happy. She was perfect. And then my dad was with her, and I couldn't remember the last time I had seen my dad smile. And he was perfect. And they were smiling, and I was at peace. Decades of just bad gone. But then they started to leave, and it was a horror. I called out to them, don't leave me. It was, and they heard, obviously they heard me. They came back and they kind of looked at me and smiled. I'm like, and then when they started to leave again, I followed them, and they went into everything. They went into my daughter, Keely. They went into me. They went into the trees, the sun, the wind. They never left. And I was healed. Decades of trauma. As you know, I was a drinker. I don't know if you can be a good drinker. I was a bad drinker. And up to about 9 months to a year after sitting with this medicine, I couldn't even look at alcohol. It made me physically, if I smelled booze, I would dry heave. So this was the most transformative experience of my life. It wasn't fun. It wasn't recreational. It was a 12 to 14 hour ass kicking. I was on a 1-man luge, with my blindfold on and just in it to win it. And, some of the other guys, Marcus and JT, they sounded like at different points they were getting cut, their calf was getting sawed open with a hacksaw. I'm like, what the hell's going on over there? And I remember, and I choose to use the word God, but, insert source, divine, universe, creator, mother, whatever word you choose to use, I use God. But I remember when I got to finally commune with God, and I was like I couldn't move. I was trying to roll over to help JT or get to Marcus. We're the air. These guys need some help. I need to help these men. And God just gently, moved me back, and he said, Matthew, they're getting exactly what they need. Let's focus on you, son. And I said, no, you're not listening to me. I need to help them. And he even more gently said, Matthew, trust me. They're getting what they need. Let's go, son. And we went. And the other most transformative moment of this experience was that, it's funny I break it up in halves, right? The first half was, I got home and I told Susie, I'm like, don't have to travel ever again in my life. And she's like, why? I'm like, I saw everything. I've seen it. So the first half was a tour. And then it was almost like whatever gave that tour said, can I cook, man? Check that out. And I made you. And then it was like a segue, literally like a break to the biggest, whitest, lightest thing I've ever seen that just emanated love and compassion. And I'm, genius here. I'm like, that's probably God. And, are you God? Yes. And no words. It was all energy. I never opened my mouth, and that thing didn't have a mouth. God doesn't need a mouth, right? And yes, just kind of, I like exploded. I felt the most love I've ever felt in my life. And that's when I said, God, I am a horrible human. I'm a bad father. I'm a bad husband. I'm a drunk, and I'm sorry. And I don't think he had hands, but it was just, in an instant, it was gone. All of that was gone. And he said, son, I don't make imperfect things. You're perfect. I can help. I got this stuff. You've been carrying all this for too long. Get up and let's go. We have things to do, right? And I remember at one point, asking God, like, oh my, well, where have you been? And he said, I have always been. Where have you been? But it was very lovingly, it kind of left a mark, but it was I'm like, yeah, where have I been? So,
I'm going to interrupt right here because I think you've already listed a bunch of things that are really important to expand upon. Mm-hmm. And clearly you were unable to get mental health help from a conventional source, right?
Doc, here's how, when I separated from active duty, I'll never forget, like half the class was, with the pilots was like, dude, tell them you're a quadriplegic, you'll get disability and your kids go to college for free and everything like that. I'm like, I'm going to FedEx in 2 months. What are you talking about? I had tinnitus, I had all sorts of stuff wrong with me, but I'm like, what? And I remember one of the guys, I think it was Tejas, John Sherrill. He's like, those systems don't talk, like the FAA and the VA. I'm like,
they do
with
now.
My luck, I said, with my luck, they will. And here I am 25 years later, Whiz nailed it, right? So when I went back to the VA with all my stuff, they're like, you left and you said nothing was wrong with you. I'm like, I lied because of this. And they're like, well, prove it. I think 3 years into a fight with, you need a VA, an attorney? I'm coming out of pocket to fight for benefits that I earned. I was an LSO, man. Foamy's on the back of the ship next to a Tomcat coming in low for the ace in full grunt. Horrible tinnitus.
So you had to hire an attorney. Like, what does the average guy do who served 20 years and maybe, was an E1 and has PTSD from being a grunt on, feet dry, boots on the ground? What are they doing?
You know what they do, Rosie? They go in the parking lot and they put a bullet in their head. I had the resources. I didn't need the benefits, so to speak. I was at my point in my life. I'm like, you know what? I earned this for this country. I can't sit in silence when I meditate or when I'm laying in bed. My back's killing me. These people owe me. But after however many 10 grand or 20 grand of legal fees and a court, it literally is. So you and I, one day, we're at the top of the world, top secret SCI, flying fighters with the ultimate trust of the Americans in our chain of command. The next day, we're liars. Hey, this stuff's wrong with me. Prove it. We don't believe you. What do you mean you don't believe me? I was at the tip of the spear. Ultimate trust, and now I'm a liar? So I gave up.
Oh, by the way, pulling G's and going off the front end doesn't create a TBI, right?
Car crash every landing, especially in the Tomcat, clearly, as a Grumman product. But so I gave up. I gave up. But that's when it hit me too. I'm like, what does the average grunt do who's told no and slammed the door in their face?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem with a lot of the special forces guys. I recently read, I just finished up this past weekend, a book called Revenge of the Tipping Point. And I don't know if you recall, but Tipping Point was written by Malcolm Gladwell a couple years ago, and he just wrote a follow-up book called Revenge of the Tipping Point, and he talks about suicide in both of those books. And I think one of the issues is that when you have a guy, take Jesse Gould, for example, top of his game, decorated war hero. The man's been in the shit and done everything. And if somebody like him goes into the parking lot, puts a gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger, what chance does Jesse have? And I think that's one of the things that's a tipping point with veterans and suicide is they're seeing the solution that other vets are coming up with. And we're like, well, I think that's the only answer for me. And that's why I love what you're doing and what Jesse's doing and all these other veteran groups are doing is because they're trying to find a different tipping point to bring them back and show them a different way.
Amen. Man, you nailed it. You know what? I didn't even think of it like that. It's almost like other vets look to a guy like that if they check out, like, well, he did it and he's a badass and he's me or he's better than me, quote unquote. You and I have talked about this in the past. In the veteran community, we do an awful job of trauma shaming or trauma grading. I remember lying there in my one-man luge, hanging out with God, listening to these guys get their ass kicked on the medicine. And I'm like, I don't deserve to be here. I'm at 30,000 feet in the air conditioning. My Operation Southern Watch no-fly zones were a joke. They were embarrassing to call a combat sortie, at least to me. And I'm lying here next to these guys. I felt shame. But on the medicine, God had some other things to fix, from Monica to sexual abuse to everything like that. I didn't know I was carrying. You and I both did a great job of compartmentalizing, putting all these boxes down until one day, like a jack in the box, they all decide to open at the same time. So you nailed it.
You have to. You can't function in that environment and then be worried about, pick something from childhood, right? Something I'd love to unpack with you is I have a lot of perspective what it's like to be a woman. That's my experience on planet Earth, right? As a woman. So everything that I've experienced is through that lens. I had a really interesting conversation with another Tomcat guy last night, and he's getting into coaching, and he specifically wants to do trauma-informed coaching for men. And we had this really great conversation about how men are socialized in our culture. And I think where it's applicable here, I mean, there's many applications, but where it's applicable here is men are told to suck it up. Like, I at least have the freedom as a woman to go and ask for help somewhere. But somebody like you who's socialized that I have to protect my family, I have to provide for my family, I can't process sexual trauma as a man. I have to stuff that way deep down inside. What are your thoughts on that?
Man, one of my favorite Cure songs, Boys Don't Cry, right? That's how we're raised, is suck it up, buttercup, and the machismo, you can't show any weakness. And obviously, as kids growing up, at least in our generation, you see a little to dig at somebody, you're gonna take that opportunity. Just bad experience as a child, but you nailed it. At least, you had to, for lack of a better word, you had to man up. And it's so cool. And you know me, Rosie, I didn't I didn't do any, I did the medicine to heal. I needed to put the mask on myself and unfornicate who I am. But it's so cool now. Like, at this retreat, like, a guy saying, "Hey, it's so cool that you're so vulnerable." And like, however he said it, I'm like, I don't see myself as what he's saying. Right. Like the fact that you're so whatever, and you're allowed to the exact opposite of what you were talking about. I'm like, oh, wow, I guess I am like that now. But I don't know. I guess the shift obviously was the medicine, but you're right. I had a previous life of man up to I'm the village idiot and I need help. Can you help me? And yeah, I think that light switch was the medicine. And real quick, because you asked that and I didn't answer it, you and I call it the medicine because it actually heals. So if there are some listeners or viewers calling them drugs are made by a dude or a lady in a lab coat with a beaker, focused on profit. It's a revolving door between the VA and the pill factories. Ibogaine, some of these medicines can be one and done. And if you're the CEO of Pfizer, that makes your headquarters implode. I mean, that can't happen, right? It cured alcohol in me. Hell, it destroyed caffeine. I was a coffee idiot, and I gently got back into it, but it was a clean reset. So big pharma, the alcohol and tobacco lobbies aren't digging this, but I will call this medicine because it in fact healed. It's not a drug.
I love what you say about so they're scheduled, right? Because supposedly they have no medical use, which is stupid, and they're highly addictive, which is even stupider, if stupider is a word. Because as you say, that's the very definition of alcohol and tobacco.
If you look at the harm to you or others scale, psilocybin's over here. It doesn't harm anybody else, and it's like a little piece of maybe you. And alcohol and tobacco are the biggest harm to you and other. I mean, ain't nobody getting into a bar fight on mushrooms or cannabis, right? Everybody's loving each other or eating burgers. But yeah, 100% legal. But you and I know the government is famous for labeling things the exact opposite of what they are. So I don't, Richard Nixon, let's hope that, once he passed away, he experienced what I experienced, and he's with God and source. But man, that guy, he put us on in a bad way. The war on drugs. Hey, here's a rifle. Go kill the yellow man on the other side of the planet you've never met before. No, I'm not going to do that. Why? Well, I took these mushrooms and I love everybody. Okay, well, those are a felony now. Here's your rifle. Go kill people. So the whole Schedule 1, and that's subversive. And, as Michael Pollan writes about in How to Change Your Mind, so hippies got screwed with the mushrooms being a felony, and then the African Americans in our country got screwed with marijuana, and cannabis. So the war on drugs was an absolute failure. So, I love me some hippies. I love my mala beads and my drug rug and stuff like that. That first psychedelic revolution, so to speak, was led by those people. But, maybe Timothy O'Leary and, let's put it in the water, probably freaked some people out. If this psychedelic revolution can be led by veterans or Stanley Cup champs, or, I sat with the medicine with Robert Gallery, who was an NFL, he was an All-American at Iowa and then an NFL player for the Raiders. Man, I rode in the car with him so you meet in San Diego. Why? Because if you do what we're talking about in San Diego, you're a felon. If you drive an hour south to northern Mexico, it'll save and change your life. So let that sink in, folks. But this guy, I drove in the car with him, and I was sitting next to a 300-pound, 6'5" dead iceberg, just a gray human. And he, you don't, as you know, your doc, they don't know you had CTE until you die and they cut your melon open. But this guy, he's like, I clearly had it. Let me fast forward real quick.
Like we can't diagnose that just by doing basic neurological tests. But anyway, I digress.
Correct. No, so Susie and I were in a fundraiser a year later, and we're walking, and all of a sudden I get like this big elbow, and I look, and it's this huge dude. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get my ass kicked. And it was Robert. I didn't recognize the man. He was a completely different human being, light, white, and he's actually started a foundation to try and get NFL players Ibogaine treatment. You can probably speak to the science better than I can, but the neuroplasticity of these medicines is insane. Regrows dead neural pathways, creates new ones. I didn't do the medicine to be a a better trader or better other stuff, everything got kind of scrubbed and was better. Like Aaron Rodgers didn't do ayahuasca to be a better football player, right? But just about everything in my life got better. But before we go on, let's drop anchor a little bit here. It's not a magic pill.
I was just going to say, let's talk about the dark side.
There you go. What are we close to? I think we're around 75 people you and I've helped so far. Knock on wood, not a single grant recipient has gotten home and said, complete waste of time. I'm worse. But there has been folks who have gotten home and had problems with what we call integration. Right. And I'll never forget Doc Martine at the Mission Within that next morning, like Christmas morning after the medicine. I'm running around the house like I'm a new kid. I'm healed. Doc's like, all right, Whiz, throttle back. He's like, 5%'s the medicine, Whiz. And here he's like 95%'s the integration. I'm like, that's a dumb ratio. Blah. I think he's wrong. It's probably 1 in 99. When you get home, you are literally you have a clean piece of paper. If you choose to go back to some of the things that made you sick, you're going to be in a dogfight. It's going to reset all those H2A receptors and all sorts of stuff. So I remember getting to the airport in San Diego to fly home, and I remember walking past the airport bar and just almost vomiting. So it'll set you up for success. But as you and I know, we use this word for a reason. You have to do the work. If you don't do the work, there's going to be some challenges.
I would also submit that the reason why we haven't had any problems with the No Fallen Heroes group is because we do screening.
Amen. Yeah, so that's a great point. So if you're, not only do we do screening, when you get to the retreat centers, they're going to do a drug test, they're going to do an alcohol test. If you're on meds, you work with not me, you work with the retreat centers to either step you down or all sorts of stuff. If there's a history of mental illness in your family, there is a very thorough screening process. This isn't Super Trooper. If you boys like Mexico, and let's just go, down there and get nuts. So good point. And let me cover this too. There are so many different healing modalities. I found, maybe it found me. I found yoga, right? And old Whiz, if I saw me doing a downward dog in Fort Lauderdale, I would have kicked my own ass, right? And of course, tough fighter pilot. I'm like, girls do yoga. It can't be that hard. 30 minutes into my first 60-minute session, I was on my back and I thought I was dying as these girls are laughing at me. I'm like, oh my God, this is embarrassing. So yoga helped linking breath work with movement. Then one of the instructors is like, well, you meditate, obviously, right? I'm like, I can't sit still for 30 seconds. So I did a meditation retreat. So yoga, breath work, and then the medicine entered my life. So that was some good flight preparation. Here's why I'm talking about this. Those are healing modalities in and of themselves. Some people find peace with yoga, some with meditation, with holotropic breath work, walking on the beach, climbing a mountain in Nepal. This is what I needed in my life at that time. I like to say that God, source, whatever, meets all of us where we are, right? You don't have to elevate up or God ain't coming down. It's going to meet you where you are. So it's radical trauma might need radical healing. I would definitely consider this radical healing, but good catch, Doc. It's not for everybody.
Well, one of the goals of this podcast is to highlight the fact and highlight where we absolutely need to overlap between the standard Western model and the traditional world medicines. And this is definitely alternative, right? If you're talking about alternative medicine, acupuncture, yoga, holotropic breathing, like psychedelic medicine is the ultimate alternative from the Western context. But I get so frustrated that we can go into the VA. What are the 1.5 million for research, and how much does the government spend every minute?
We got 15 seconds of funding over 5 years.
5 years, yeah. And it's like, okay, there's a real there's a real crisis. And I think the crisis goes deeper than just an opioid crisis within the veteran community. I think the crisis is actually that we're not taking care of our veterans. Because how are you going to fill a military service with volunteers when people know that you're just going to get tossed out and thrown away at the end?
Kristin, you've met my boys. I was steering them away. From military. The number one source of recruitment for our military for generations has been us. For a long time there, I didn't know a single vet who's like, I want my kid to go serve. I actively steered both of them away. Now, Matthew, my oldest, didn't listen. He's in the Air Guard up in Jacksonville, wants to fly F-35s. My middle boy, Jack's out in Boulder. So yeah, I think he's going to be our hippie. But you nailed it. And I think that's why what you and I are doing is critical. If we can provide a safe place to land, let's manifest this right now. You and I should be in TAP class. I got invited out to some MARSOC thing in Camp Pendleton to talk to both
for the listening public. Define TAP for them.
Transition Assistance Program. So when Rosie and I got out, you were forced to go sit in some classes like, here's how to be a civilian. Don't say F, the F word in your interview. I think it's gotten better. Let's just hope it's gotten better. But how to write a resume, but the transition assistance, whatever they call it nowadays, you and I are way too old. It should include at least somebody like you and I talking about this, or at least maybe they do mental health, but at least alternative medicines. But you're right. It's so funny. I was actually up in Palm Beach yesterday. And as you know, Dr. Deborah Mash, if you Google her name, she's the queen of Ibogaine. She's been, I got winged in 93 and she's been working with Ibogaine since the early 90s. I was up at a clinic in Palm Beach called the Hanley Foundation, a huge, beautiful addiction campus. Heartbreaking. One of the building complexes we went in was kids with their moms. Instead of mothers with addictions or issues being separated from their kid, the courts coming in or child services saying, well, we're good. They're there with their, I walked around like with tears in my eyes, but Ibogaine, right? I have a buddy. He's not a military guy here in Boca. He spent $60,000 to go to a retreat center in Texas for 30 days. And he said it was a living hell and he's back to drinking. I'm like, I'm trying. And as you know, Doc, you can't, the medicine has to call to them. You can't, I'm like, I brief. And then now I just got to sit back. Can't say you got to go do Ibogaine. You have to want to do it. But
yeah, just knowing what the experience is like, you definitely have to want to go through that, to get to the other side.
You have to want to heal. I think you and I were in Costa Rica for Iboga when I got that message, because I was a healed machine. And then about a year later, when we went to Costa Rica, I wasn't feeling too good. I thought I was failing, trying to help people. God, they're not healing. And I'll never forget, man, lying there in that temple, God appearing and saying, Matthew, you can't heal anybody, son. That's my job. And they have to want to. I'm paraphrasing clearly, keep doing what you're doing. Drag them, push them, carry them to the door, but they have got to want to heal. They have to want to get rid of the things that have made them sick. That's where I come in. And I'm like, another one of those 100-pound backpack off my back. I remember coming out of the medicine. I'm like, that's exactly what I needed. So you nailed it. Folks have to want to heal, and you can't push this on them. But to your point, I didn't even think about these retreat centers charging, or Malibu, right? The whatever in Malibu, $100,000 for a 2-week type of inpatient thing. All these people at this thing yesterday, I'm like, I'm telling you, after sitting with Ibogaine once, that it might put this place out of business. And I said that, I'm like, I hope that didn't sound like a threat, right? I mean, it's a nonprofit, so but we are at, as Bart would say, this is the age of Aquarius. We really are on the leading edge of this. If the two fighter pilots can sit on a podcast here and talk about psychedelic-assisted therapy, something's going to change. Either you and I are both full of shit, or there's something here. right? And I know we're
Well,
not. So
both, and maybe I'm full of shit, and I could be an advocate. But you make a really good point, and this is one that I talk about all the time in my office, and behind closed doors. Is you have to be ready for naturopathic medicine. You've got to be ready for acupuncture. You've got to be ready to question the person in the white coat that says you need this pill, and you're going to be on it the rest of your life. Until you're ready to start questioning that, I don't think that you can really make the change to give your body what it needs to heal naturally.
You know what's funny is I remind people, doctors do what? They practice medicine. What do attorneys do? They practice law. They don't execute medicine, it's called a practice for a reason. That's why maybe you should get a second opinion. Wait a minute. Aren't you a doctor and all knowledgeable? So folks, this is, there's a little bit of trial and error of this, but remember the things that Rosie and I are talking about right now have been used for thousands and thousands of years. We in the West act like we just discovered this, and this is something new. And the Bwiti in Gabon would be like, welcome to the party. Or a medicine woman in the Amazon would be like, okay, yay. What are you talking about? Facilitator training. I've been doing this for 9 generations. A certificate.
Well, I think that illustrates the fact that when we do these things recreationally, we're not respecting the tradition and respecting the plant medicine, which sounds all, foofy and woo-woo, but those cultures don't have the same problems we do. And maybe if we could, put our ego on a shelf for just a moment and have a little humility, we could probably learn a lot about how they approach health and healing from a traditional aspect as opposed to a conventional allopathic model that we have.
What's that saying? If you go to a true healer and they say you're sick, they'll ask you, when did you stop dancing? When did you stop singing? When did you stop walking in nature? It's the truth. So we can learn from these people. And the medicine, this is the medicine. It's so funny because back to your point about like set and setting, almost every time somebody's like, oh, I tried mushrooms and it was crazy. I'm like, let me guess. You were in a concert in Red Rocks and, the rocks melted. Yeah. Set and setting, folks. It's almost as doing these medicines in the wrong way and something, quote, bad happens. It might be telling you not to do it, right? The stove's hot. Don't touch the stove. So in the medicine space, we always talk about set. What's your mindset going into the medicine? Oh, I want to go trip at a concert. And then the setting, obviously a concert. So any of the medicine work we do, whether it's Rising Ridge or Oregon or, down in Awaken Your Soul or any of these great retreat centers we use, it's half spiritual and half clinical too, right? Especially the Mission Within. There's 2 nurses that are holding space throughout the night. You're on an EKG. You can explain it better than I can, but Ibogaine has the potential, something in between the heartbeats, something like that. But now
it messes with the heart rhythm. Yeah.
Now they use Ibogaine, right? Or I'm sorry, magnesium. A drip or something to help alleviate that. You can Google the Stanford study. So set and setting is absolutely critical with these medicines. They're not, it's so funny, when I was in DC one time, it was Rick Doblin and I. If you don't know who Rick Doblin is, MDMA, MAPS founder, the guy's been at this for 3-4 decades. And I gave my Ibogaine, here's what happened to Whiz, and he gave the MDMA pitch. And I'll never forget, it was the chief of staff of Kay Granger's office. And he looked at us and he's like, why aren't you leading with that guy? Like what that guy's talking about? And I clearly didn't have an answer because Rick's been doing this forever. He's like, well, MDMA was the last one you guys clipped. So, we just blew the dust off and we'll resubmit. And we all know kind of what happened with MDMA in August because it did, the FDA advisory panel, the party stigma of MDMA. I'm like, folks, Ibogaine was a 12 to 14 hour ass kicking. You're not taking Ibogaine and going out to a club. So kind of like Apollo 13, NASA calls it a successful failure. Didn't get to the moon, but we got the guys home. I think that MDMA thing was a successful failure because, we should have led with the plants, in my opinion. Even the most anti-drug Republican Law and Order, when I give them a Whiz heart to heart for 10 minutes, they're like, wow. All right, let's go. Why aren't we doing this type of thing? But I think we learned from that MDMA debacle.
Well, according to Malcolm Gladwell, because and I know I keep quoting him, but his books are fascinating. He looks at the percentage that is required to create a tipping point when you're working on getting a group to do something. And his theory is that you hit 25% and suddenly, boom, everything just goes. So if we can hit 25% in some way,
wow, okay,
we will likely get there. I think one of the questions, at least in Washington State, one of the big questions is regulation and whether or not that comes with decriminalization. Because once you regulate something without decriminalization, and decriminalization is a longer discussion topic than we have time for right now, but basically says you can still have access to plant medicine. Once you regulate it and then you put a price tag on it, it is now out of the hands of the people that need it the most, the people without resources. So it's we'll see how that 25% works. Some people say let's regulate it because we need it. And we'll figure that part out. But I think we've learned with cannabis that may not necessarily be true. But two different medicines, two different mechanisms of action. Hey, Whiz, with the last couple of minutes, I am going to have you back on because I've like a list of 6 things that I had questions on. But one of the things that gets left out of the conversation, and I know it hasn't been left out of our conversations because when Nicole was getting me ready for my journey, she called my partner. But I want to hear about your, you have a relationship with the medicine, but Susie also has a relationship with the medicine, meaning that when somebody goes through the medicine, they change. How does that affect the people that they have relationships with?
Great question, Doc. Thank you for this, because I'd be remiss to not talk about this. So I got home. First of all, my as you know, Susie's she's a gift from God. I have no idea. Well, she loves me. I learned what true love can actually be, right? So, I got home. Let's go 30, 60, 90. The first 30 days, I'm in the yard hugging a tree, and Susie's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Look at the tree. It's beautiful. I mean, God made this thing. Come out here and hug it with me." God. I mean, we call it the pink cloud phase, right? I mean, just literally, you look at everything differently, and the miracle technically in everything that we see. The odds of you and I being on this podcast right now are like 1 in 4 trillion. I think there's 2 trillion galaxies in this universe. We shouldn't be alive. So it just that you get 30 days of that, right? And then it's tough. 30 to 60. Because Susie, I remember debriefing Susie on the beach, giving her a 6-hour debrief. And I remember her face sometimes during it, like, what the hell is he talking about? And what happened to my husband? So a couple weeks after being home, I'm like, Suze, what's up, man? Let's go. Get up. Yay. Everything's great. She's like, well, yay for you. She had to deal with me in some bad times. So that 30 to 60 days was tough. I pull up to a stoplight and there's a homeless guy. I'm like, oh my God, that's me. I am there, but for the grace of God, I am that. That piece of God, of Christ consciousness that's in me is him. We are all one. Why is there war? I mean, I'll tell you, I think this, but I think the other reason these medicines are still Schedule 1 and illegal is they can turn warriors into peacemakers. I saw 16 guys this weekend, guys with limbs missing, who were meat-eating killers, who Sunday afternoon thought nothing but peace and love and compassion and understanding. Military-industrial complex ain't going to dig that.
That is very dangerous for the status quo.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So in the dark, it wasn't super dark, but in the 30 to 60, Susie's like, I think I should go sit with the medicine. And she did. She went to the Mission Within. She went with a couple other ladies, I think a Gold Star spouse. They did psilocybin, MDMA heart opener. So as you know, if you just take a atomic bomb of mushrooms, it can be pretty violent. So they do a little heart opener, mushrooms, and they did 5-MeO DMT the next day. I'll tell you, Rosie, and I didn't know, let's back up. Susie, I didn't know she was worried. When I went to do the medicine, she's like, I was terrified. I was wondering if you'd realize that you didn't love me, or that you'd be better off without me, or that I'm awful. I'm like, oh my God, on the medicine, I couldn't think of any. You were an angel. You were perfect. I saw us ascend together into oneness. And she's like, really? I was like, really? You were worried? She's like, yeah. When she went, Rosie, I was terrified. I held space. I had my candles lit because, I knew when she was going to be doing the medicine. I'm like, oh my God, I know how she feels. She's going to recognize what a horrible human I was. And
well, it's like you weren't just integrating the journey, or like you had to integrate 30 years of living together.
Amen.
And that takes deep trust in a relationship, to be able to, number one, trust that you're going to go do, quote unquote drugs in Mexico, and come back.
Yep.
But then sit down and have deep, meaningful conversations with somebody about what just happened the last 30 years.
Exactly. Yeah. It nailed it. So she got home. And when they got their phones back, like after on Sunday or whatever, I remember watching the phone for I'd never done this in my life, man. I'm like watching the phone to get a text from her, and she's like, "Hi, I'm okay. I love you forever." And I'm like,
"Whew."
And it's funny because when she got home, she's like, "Wait, you were worried?" I'm like, "Yeah, just like you were. Come on, we're a team here." So
I think it illustrates that you don't just go do the medicine. You need to integrate, and you need to integrate with the people that you spend the most time with, your kids. I'm sure you've had conversations with your children about this. And these aren't, which illustrates the point that these things are just, they're not recreational. They're extremely intentional. And you continue working long after to make sure that you're getting the mental health benefit and capitalizing on the neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity doesn't mean just being a better trader or for me, maybe a better doctor. It's about building different habit patterns. Michael Pollan did a really good job of talking about that particular piece.
I remember getting to the airport Sunday after the Ibogaine. The Uber driver missed the stopping point, for the wrong airline. Old Whiz would have flipped his shit because I was already running late. I was absolutely at ease, and I was apologizing to him. I'm like, it's okay. Me, TSA, secondary screening, we're going to anal cavity search you. I'm like, okay. Old me, they would have locked me in jail. I looked at myself, I'm like, it's so much easier being nicer. It takes so much work to be angry. 25 facial muscles to frown and one to smile, whatever it is. I'm like, what? Our default mode is love and empathy for each other and compassion. And I had my walls up, man. I was carrying a weapon my entire life, and the medicine finally helped me put it down. But you nailed it. So we came up with a guide. It's called Healing Together, because Susie no slam on, my first medicine. They didn't have anything like that. She was like, what is going on? So we actually have a manual at No Fallen Heroes for your significant others while you're going to sit with the medicine. Or as you alluded to, your coach will reach out to, your significant other, your partner, your wife, your husband, and keep them in the loop or help them a little bit too, because it is the unknown. But whatever's supposed to happen will happen, right? I think, and we already talked about our close to 75 folks we've helped, knock on wood, nothing wrong. The only thing I've heard, and this is going to be anecdotal. This isn't a fact. I don't know it. One of our sister squadrons was like, the only negative we've ever seen was a guy came home. She did the medicine too. They ended up getting divorced. I'm like, oh my God. And they're like, no. They realized they were better friends. They're better divorced, and they're better than when they were married. I'm like, oh, so it worked out. So there is no, again, I haven't heard of any massive oh, I'm coming home and I don't like you anymore. I mean, if you stay together that long and you have something that knocks the crud, it's a fire hose that just takes all the mud and gunk off of you, I think things are going to be okay. But like I said, everything is designed and is going to happen exactly how it's supposed to. You just have to trust.
All right. Well, I think we're just about out of time. I appreciate you coming on the show and talking about the most alternative flight plan that there can be at this point in
I
our...
love the name of your podcast, Doc.
Yeah.
You nailed it. That's perfect. That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. So Whiz is the founder of No Fallen Heroes. Whiz, why don't you take a brief moment to tell people how they can find us and where to look for us on socials?
You bet. So go to nofallenheroes.com. If you're a veteran, a first responder, or a family member, click on the top right under Contact Us. It says Grant Request. So you just fill out a grant request, you get in our system, and we'll start going through the process. We provide full or partial grants. If you're a self-pay, sadly, I have to say this, you go right to the top, because raising money for a foundation is a 24-hour thing. So we're always tight on funds. So if you apply and we don't get back to you like next Monday, it's, sadly, Rosie and I are a victim of our own success. And what do I mean by that? The more people who are helped, I call it the world's best Ponzi scheme. You go home and you put the ladder down and you want to help your sisters and your brothers heal. So go ahead and fill that out. No Fallen Heroes YouTube channel has some great content. You got to check out Rosie's 2 or 3 podcasts that she did. She did some incredible debriefs on the Max Afterburner podcast. And then you can just follow us on Instagram, the No Fallen Heroes Instagram account. But again, Rosie, I was humbled and honored to hold space for you in Costa Rica. Your surgery story made my eyes tear up, and
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Oh my God. And as I'm in my luge and you were in a little bit of a dogfight, I remember going, oh my God, I hope she gets what of course you're going to get what you need. But I had my doubts, and I remember like, oh my God, she's in it, man. She's in a furball dogfight here. And then the next day when you kind of gave your first debrief, I had tears in my eyes. So thank you, first of all, for having me, but thank you for all you're doing, man. One team, one fight. And I love you. I love what you're doing, and keep doing it.
Likewise. And if you are one of those people listening and you don't really feel like you need to go to a retreat, but you want to help a veteran, we love that. One of my pet peeves is people who say, thank you for your service. And then, how about thank you for your service and how can I help? And that's not meant to shame people. That's meant to say, hey, there's something that you can do. And if it's not our organization, please help another veterans organization. So, and if you like the alternative flight plan, please like, subscribe, and share so we can start getting out the message and hit our 25%, get this thing moving towards the tipping point. So Whiz, thanks. I look forward to hopefully extending my podcast beyond the 6 initial episodes. And if you want to hear more from me on my specific journeys with the psychedelic medicine, I'm on episode 91 and episode 94 of the Max Afterburner podcast. So Whiz, thank you very much. And fights on.
Fights on.